Welcome back to the Asians Represent podcast. My name is Daniel, and today I have a great guest, a local guest, actually, who I'll let you do introductions. But we are revisiting a topic that we covered very early on in the podcast. I think within the first 5 episodes of Asians Represent. The audio was not very good, but the topic was important. So important that I think, I thought it was very, worthwhile for us to actually revisit this. We're talking about TTRPGs and education. This is a topic that I think is relevant to everyone, even if you aren't a teacher, if you're a parent, or you have, if you like learning. I think even if you don't have kids, this is going to be an important topic because we are going to talk about a lot of RPGs and elements of RPGs that I think lend themselves to learning. But that's it. Before we even dive into the topic, my guest, Ryan, introduce yourself. Who are you? Obviously, I've just said your name, but who are you? What do you do? Let the audience know, because this is your first time on the podcast.
It is, and I'm really excited. I mean, I would listen to it when it first came out. I think the education episode
It's the third episode or something.
But I think I saw that and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. And that's what got me listening to the podcast in the first place.
Full circle now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm Ryan Khan, online known as the one true Ryan Khan, because my name is very, very common.
Is it a common name?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's super common. I've met another Ryan Khan who's a teacher in Toronto.
Oh, wow. Same school board? Is it the same school board?
Same school board. We worked at the same school one day and I got confused.
Oh, that's awkward.
I saw some stuff for Ryan Khan that was all signed. I'm that's not my signature.
Just imposter. That's actually really funny. But is there a Ryan Khan whose accomplishments outshine yours? Because I have to deal with a Daniel Kwan who won an Oscar.
Oh, yeah.
I have to deal with that. Who's also who kind of looks like me, Chinese, has glasses,
which is all you really need sometimes for some people,
apparently. But I have to deal with that.
I just deal with emails for other Ryan Khans, really mundane everyday stuff. Today it was somebody needing a signature for something.
Is it possible that it was actually for you and you were just unsure?
No, because the picture that was sent along with it was definitely not me. I've been invited to weddings, baby
that's hilarious.
showers. I guess respond to those emails too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Just have a little fun there, not the right person?
Yes. I usually send as not your Ryan Khan.
Oh my God. I wonder if you could. I wonder if you had a second email, like a burner email, and you were not your Ryan Khan.
Oh,
you CC that every single time. I feel like that'd be funny.
There's something there.
Right? Or if there's an underlying theme to each email, you could maybe create a cool filter where it's are you sure this is the Ryan Khan? I think that might be fun.
I do have my folder of just called Not For Me.
Oh my God. That stuff scares me.
I like to hang on to it because a lot of them are just they're kind of funny to look back. It's oh, yeah, you missed your golf lesson. Sorry.
Sucker. It's just missed reminders for people and just little stories about all the Ryan Khans who have failed.
Yeah, well, I want to start looking for. I often joke that I should make a podcast where I just search out these other Ryan Khans and just learn who they are. What's their thing?
That might actually be. I feel like that's a really cool idea.
The Ryan Confluence.
The confluence. It's just the confluence.
Oh, the confluence.
And then you just reach out to all the Ryan Khans. You learn about their life stories. And then maybe one day you'll find that Ryan Khan who missed the golf lesson reminder. And then you've got their email. I think that's cool. Honestly, I think that would be I feel like there's also a tabletop RPG there. I feel like there's something. I feel like it's something you might.
Oh, there's definitely.
I feel like it's something you might design because not only are you one of many, many, many Ryan Khans, apparently, not only are you one of potentially many RyanCons who are teachers, but I think uniquely you might be the only RyanCon tabletop designer that I know.
I'm the
That I
only
know for sure.
uh, that I know as well. I haven't come across other Ryan cons. So in the TTRPG world. So I think that's where I gotta carve out my niche.
That you gotta like be the alpha RyanCon in
Yeah.
design. And
Well, that's
honestly, I think your stuff is really good. Like your
thank
stuff is
you.
really good. So like we first met. I feel like we first met before the pandemic for sure.
Yes.
We first met before the pandemic. We talked a bit. Then like shit got real in the world. Um,
Oh yes.
Especially for you, I imagine, because you're a teacher.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was just a bizarre time of like I wasn't working for a while because schools were shut down. I got to teach online for a year.
How was that?
And I honestly, I had a really good time. I was teaching kindergarten online, and we had a really good time.
So is it kindergarten online? I guess you don't have to do as much classroom management because it's up to the parents to do that.
A little bit, but I still have to like be engaging enough that make so that
That
they
they're
don't just
watching
get
the
distracted.
screen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. But we actually had a really good I used a lot of games for that. A lot of games, a lot of storytelling.
I want to know all about that. I want to know all about that because I mean, not only like is our long history the reason why you're on the show, but because uh, when I went back to Breakout Con this year, you had a booth.
Yes. That was my first time tabling at a con, and it was a really good experience. Like meeting like other designers,
Yeah,
other people just like in the TTRPG sphere was really cool. And then seeing people getting excited about games is just like
yeah. I mean, like
it was invigorating.
you had like a cool booth. You had a really cool concept because you were actually running a game the entire con. I see it on
I
the wall behind
yes,
you,
right there.
which was so cool because, like, of course we were talking, and we also sat on a panel together.
Yes, we
Um,
did.
but I remember your booth having that. And you're like, "Do you want to draw a constellation?" And I was like, "What's this for?" And you're like, "Oh, it's for one of my games." And I thought that was really neat, and it got me thinking, like, "Oh, okay. I think we really have to revisit education in TTRPGs because, well, I've just found the perfect local Asian guest to do it because our last guest was like all the way over on the other side of the world in Southeast Asia.
Oh right,
Um,
the
Kyril Hisham.
Philippine.
Yeah.
Yes,
He was
yes.
in, I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not going to say it. You'll have to go back, audience, and listen to like episode 3 of the podcast. But yeah, I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to kind of, I don't want to say post pandemic world because we aren't really post pandemic. But I want to say in the COVID era that we're in right now, I think schools are really being pushed to the limit. Like not only in budgets, but also teachers. Like teachers are like just dropping off. Like they're leaving
Oh,
teaching, they're
yeah.
underfunded, they're burning out, and kids are not as engaged anymore because everyone is so burnt out.
Hmm.
I so Level Up Gaming, the autism program that I run, a couple of the participants have been like in school, like in college or finishing up high school entirely online. And now
Hmm.
they're finally kind of going back to do in person learning and they're getting burnt out.
Oh, I see that with my students a lot, and it's not just the burnout. I'm finding like so I teach this year I'm teaching grade 4 and grade 5.
Hmm.
And what I'm seeing is like those like 2 to 3 years of like kind of weird, inconsistent schooling has had a major effect on a lot of students. There are like some just really skills that I would typically consider kind of fundamental that are lacking because I mean, we were all trying to figure out what does online learning look like? What does learning look like for elementary school students, for high school students, for universities, right?
Right.
And so they've missed out on like some really important socializing, on some just like engagement, like being able to just like be fully immersed in this in something that is genuinely educational.
Yeah. I imagine the like the social skills side of it is just like everybody's really behind. But I'm sure
Yeah.
there are
Oh yeah.
also kids who thrived in online learning.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Like
I mean, there are a lot of.
oh
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, you go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. I mean, there like I knew students who ended up with a lot of really different opportunities because they were at home. And now a lot of those students were coming from like really stable households,
Mm.
like where they had like all their needs were being met, which isn't, I mean, which isn't the case for every student,
Yeah, it's not.
unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I know that there was like I've met people who said like, oh, the flexibility, just like I need to just make sure that this is done by a certain time and I can get it in
Yeah, like
is
the autonomy.
yeah.
I mean, for me, the work from home life has been incredible. Like, I can't go back to an office.
Oh God.
Like, I think I go to the
Yeah.
office maybe once every 3 months for like half a day at a time.
Hmm.
And that tires me out. But like, I am so productive at home and I'm just far more engaged and I'm comfortable. So I'm like, yeah, I'm like really into my work. And I think if this had happened to me when I was, if I was in university, I think it wouldn't have made much of a difference. But if I was in like high
Hmm.
school, I feel like this would have been huge for me. I think I
Mm.
honestly would have thrived if this happened to me. But I understand that that's not the case for anyone, for a lot of kids, because yeah, you said they're missing out on a lot of really important informal opportunities to kind of
Yeah.
learn from one another, right? Those social skills, like I guess even conflict resolution too. I would imagine like kids coming
That's
back not being able to handle other kids.
that's a big one, especially for like the little ones, like the really little ones, like they haven't had to share anything. They haven't had
Yeah,
to navigate like conflicting needs because when you're at home, you can just like go and do what you need to do.
yeah, that's
So,
true. I think I when I was in grad school, I took I was in this like seminar, and it was for like I was a really like at one point I was a really eager grad student who was like a TA and wanted to take a like a course to improve my teaching skills, and I didn't get much out of it. The thing that still remains is like a quote that I bring into any conversation that I have about learning. And it's actually from an unpublished dissertation from 1995 by a grad student at OISE named Alice Pitt. So, for those of you who don't live in Toronto and aren't a teacher, like this very niche group of people who would know what OISE is, OISE is the Ontario Institute of Studies in Education. It's kind of like
my
one
alma
of
mater.
oh, okay, cool. It's like one of the big teacher college is in Toronto. It's for the University of Toronto. But in this 1995 dissertation, Alice said, learning about content is not the same thing as learning from it. In other words, learning is something more than a series of encounters with knowledge. Learning entails, rather, the messier and less predictable process of becoming implicated, involved in knowledge. And
Oh yeah.
that really stuck with me because I'm like, yeah, I look back at school and I remember I had an awful, awful 10th and 12th grade math teacher.
Oh.
Same teacher. Um, and I know a lot of students will say this. She hated me. But I know that she hated me because she told my brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she told my brother she hated me and she purposefully went hard on me.
That's
Um,
messed up though. That like
it's
that she would
super
do that,
messed
but also
up.
that she would tell your brother. Like
I know.
there's so many layers to that. That's
Miss Win. Yeah. Um, but I don't. I've got to be retired by now. But yeah, it was like just like an awful teacher to me. But I had an incredible 11th grade math teacher who was super old school. Was using like transparency sheets on a projector with markers,
yeah.
and she was just this old Eastern European lady. But she just got me, and that is the 1 year in high school that I thrived at math.
Mm.
And it was the most old school of teachers. But I think because I was invested, I was like, I feel like I understand how I can use this.
Hmm.
And every other year, I struggled. Um, Obviously, having undiagnosed dyslexia and ADHD
Oh
in
my
high
God.
school was like
Yes.
brutal, but also at a time when education was very much like the Montessori sort of like style of teaching wasn't a thing.
Hmm.
People aren't really embracing sort of student-led learning, discovery learning isn't really a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, it's the type of education that you and I went through. It's you get
Oh, yeah,
told
without
things
a
and you
doubt.
regurgitate them.
Hmm. Which
And
is the most useless kind of
yeah,
education.
it's not really education, right? Because you're not taking it with you because you are using it for this, for your tests, for your evaluations. And
Yeah.
then once it's done, it's out.
I mean, I think this approach to education ends up being, like, in my opinion, like backwards
Mm.
because we have this, like, a teacher saying, here's what's important, learn it, and here's why you're supposed to care about it. It lacks context, it lacks, like, relevance to a lot of students.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that I was awful at languages because I struggled in French class. Uh, then I went on exchange to Taiwan and I got Mandarin. I mean, I'm not fluent, but I got Mandarin fast. Like, my Mandarin is so much better than my French in like 1 year, but it's because it was immediately relevant to my life. Like, I went out and I would, like, practice.
You needed it.
I would like pretend to be lost so I could,
Oh,
like, ask for directions so I could just practice speaking.
that's awesome.
Whereas
That's
here,
awesome.
it's like I don't need French. I don't use French. And if I come across someone who speaks French, they also 9 times out of 10 speak English.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, I'm
that's
not saying that
true.
French is a bad thing to learn, and if you enjoy it, like, awesome. But if you weren't just intrinsically motivated, it's like, well, why? Like, why am I going to put effort into this?
Yeah, if you weren't engaging with it outside of the classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or your time spent with it in the classroom was more of a chore to you than anything.
Yes,
Like that's me
absolutely.
in French. It was like, oh, it was the thing that you had to do, and then when I didn't have to take French anymore, I dropped it.
It was
Um,
gone.
and then it's gone. Like obviously, I think as any sort of like any born and like Canadian born and raised, I've still retained French.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I mean,
but do I sound good? No.
no.
Can I get around? No. Um, but it's just kind of ingrained. But I feel like it was just branded onto me
Mm-hmm.
rather than something I kept because it was important. And I feel like that's
Yeah,
what TTRPGs can be used for, right?
absolutely,
I when I asked
absolutely.
our patrons for questions, I got one, and we normally do questions at the end, but the first one was just so relevant
Mm-hmm.
that I had to start with this. So, Windstorm H, she asked, I don't know if this is in the scope of what you're planning. Yes, it was. But I was recently invited to teach and GM for a family with a 13-year-old. I've never GM'd for anyone under 18. So, what advice do you have for gaming with kids? And I think this is incredibly relevant to the topic at
Oh
hand, and
yeah.
it's the educational potential of RPGs because it doesn't matter what game you're playing. Play D&D, play like Pathfinder, play literally anything that they are interested in because in storytelling games, practicing helpful behavior is commonplace, right? Because every
Yes.
single session is structured, collaborative problem solving where you have to work on your communication skills, your reasoning skills. You have to learn from failure, which is huge and kids don't get anymore. And you have to connect with others in a meaningful
Mm-hmm.
way, right? And
I mean,
that's something that's missing in the classroom.
I've always felt that gaming together creates a very unique kind of intimacy,
Mm,
and that's one that can be leveraged in really, really fantastic ways in the classroom because it's also building rapport. It's also, like, doing something that is just fun.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I met a board game designer. Uh, his name is Scott. I can't remember his last name, but BS Games,
Okay.
also from Toronto.
Oh, shut out.
And he said for educational games, they have to be games first because
Yes.
students will see through it otherwise. I was like, yes, like, these things have to be games. It's like, I've met people who said, like, oh, we're gonna play a math game, roll 2 dice and add the numbers together or
That's
multiply
not
them
a
together. It's
game.
like, that's not a game. That's just using dice to get a number.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
there's but like, when you make something a game, a game is begging to be played. And when the students just want to play it, it's like, okay, you've got this engagement, you've got this like again, like some intrinsic motivation, and then you can just run with that so easily.
Yeah, I like that. It needs to be a game first because a lot of people will design a game around a curriculum topic,
Yes.
um, rather than build a curriculum topic into an entertainment experience. That's a really good way of putting it. I like that. You
Yeah,
need to
that's some
be it needs to be engaging, and the subject matter is clearly not engaging to the students, and so the medium to
yeah.
which it's delivered needs to be engaging.
Mhm.
That's cool. I think for me, when I'm thinking about the question, and it's like, okay, well, you're gonna GM a game for a 13-year-old with a bunch of adults,
Mhm.
right? Like, what advice do you have? And it's the same thing that I would bring into like any classroom. Like, what are we trying to achieve here? Like, obviously, if this is going to be for like friends or family, I would first say, like, ask, well, what do they want? Because they're
I
the
mean,
one who needs to be engaged. All the adults will obviously like play along because you're there and the kids there. But like, what do they want out of the experience,
I
right?
guess it's this new layer of like your session zero, right? Where you're
Yeah,
gonna like you want to find out. I mean, at least for me, for any table, that session zero is like, what do you want? Like, if we're playing like D&D, it's like there are lots of things you can explore within that sandbox, and not everybody wants to explore the same thing. And just finding out, especially like with a 13-year-old, like what do they want to get out of the experience?
yeah,
And they may not have like the most like they may not really know, but it is this inherently creative thing that is it's not hard to get buy-in from a 13-year-old.
100%, 100%. I think it doesn't matter what game you're going to play, they're going to be into it. For me, it's like one of the factors is success at the table. You'll want a game where everybody is working together.
Mm-hmm.
You want a game where teamwork and collaboration is very much required for everyone to succeed because you want the adults to be supporting the kid, right? You want the
Mm-hmm.
kid to be supporting the adults, right? You want that collaborative behavior that you're trying to encourage. There are a lot of RPGs where you can just kind of go solo and leave the group and do what you want.
Yeah,
Um, that's not what I would recommend. There are many
yeah, I
that
agree.
mechanically enforce actually playing as a group and sticking together.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
obviously,
mean, I
the best one is, and I was looking for it, but I realized I packed it away. There is a My Little Pony RPG called Tales of
oh yeah, Tails.
Equestria,
Yes.
and it has a friendship mechanic, and it basically uses a stripped down 5e rule set with a
Mm-hmm.
friendship mechanic. And you could literally take those rules or that mechanic and then put another skin over it based on their
Oh,
interests,
easily,
right?
easily. I
But
mean,
yeah, that would be my advice. Is like you have to start with, what do they want to achieve? Like, what does the kid want?
and I think there's some setting expectations. Like, here's kind of what the game is about. And like, I ran Honey Heist for some of my students one day,
Mm,
and like just the conceit of like you're working together to steal the honey was more than enough for them to just start like bouncing off of each other and just like really like consider like, oh, this is a heist, we're a team, we have a goal to reach, let's do this. And they got to be bears and terrorize people, so that was also helpful. But you know, like, yeah, like just the kind of the set dressing to that
right. That's
is
cool.
inherently collaborative.
And it's silly too, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're gonna steal the honey. Now I gotta ask you because I know not all classrooms have teaching aides, teaching assistants.
Mhm.
Is it just you as the
Yeah,
teacher?
it's just me. I've got 24 students.
So how do you do that with 24 players?
So I don't typically do it with 24 players. What I've been doing, I've been training little GMs
Oh, awesome.
so that they can then start running their own little groups in the class.
Right.
I have a handful of solo games in the classroom as well, so they can like if that is a way that they want to explore, they can. But a lot of it is like I mean, this is a thing that you see a lot in teaching, where it's like you kind of get the group on a big activity and then start pulling a few kids here and there.
Right.
And so for a lot of the storytelling stuff, I'll do things like that, or it's things that they can kind of run on their own.
Gotcha. So kind of like you're identifying students who are like showing the desire to maybe be leaders or catching on to
Yeah,
this, and you're giving them sort of responsibility. Hey, you can run this game. You're also, providing an opportunity to those who, maybe don't want to participate in these group activities, and you have a solo game where you can still kind of take control of your learning.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
are all of these games that you've designed?
Oh no, I mean, I had like I at the beginning of the school year, I went through the um that first giant itch bundle, the one for was it racial
Oh
equality?
yeah, that one. There was like several thousand games in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I went through and like curated a list of games I thought would be approachable for like 10-year-old students,
Which
and I
ones?
printed up. I mean, a lot of like prompt based ones were really good.
Right.
Um, like God, what's it called? Kiana, what's her last name?
Kiana Shaw?
Uh, about the astronaut and going to space, and
Oh yeah, I have a physical copy of that. That Kiana gave me at a con. I gotta
but
find
like
that.
it was a great game because it's just a couple of pages, and it's very easy to understand.
Right.
And so like I had stuff like that, or I had like a bunch of little zine games because then it's like we talked about like making zines as well.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, our first kind of big project in the class was make a game that uses the number 10,000.
Okay, tell me more. So was that the only parameter? Like design a game, it uses the number 10,000.
Yeah,
Does it have to be in the title? Does it have to be in the mechanics?
I
Anything.
left it totally open because this was the beginning of the
Okay.
year. So I was not as like I wasn't thinking as much about content and thinking a little bit more about like building classroom relationships and having something to
Right.
focus on. And then I mean 10,000 was just because like literally in the curriculum they have to work with numbers up to 10,000.
Oh my god, okay.
But like just some really clever games
I want to
that
know
came out of
more.
that.
I
Like
got to know more.
like one of them was like this really intense Fortnite inspired game, but
Okay.
there was this giant map and cards for where you could drop in and loot cards, and um I think like you could earn up to like 10,000 V-bucks.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
V-bucks, but
Yeah, trademark. Yeah.
yeah. But another student who made a tourist trap game about like getting
Okay.
stuck in tourist traps and trying to like make money from tourists.
Oh my god. Like scamming tourists?
It was more like it wasn't like a full-on scam, but more like pitch.
Okay. Okay.
It's like
That's interesting though. They're kind of drawing on, real world stuff. That's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. I mean, there's
You did
one
basically
group.
you just did a game jam.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just did the
And it was
10,000 game jam.
and like everyone was super engaged, and we ended up with some really cool things. And we had a day where we got to like play each other's games, and
Right.
it's like yeah, this is
I feel like I
cool.
missed out when I was a student. That would have been so cool. And like what a great way to get kids to, especially at the start of the year, feel comfortable with one another, do something
Hmm.
that's kind of silly, do something that's free form. And then, then they have to present it to everyone, I'm assuming, and then they have to
Yeah. Oh
teach
yeah.
it to others. So that's another skill.
I mean, it taps into so many different skill sets.
And
And like when they started teaming up, there's like, okay, you're gonna take care of the art. I'm gonna take care of the board. You're gonna do this stuff.
right.
It's like,
And then they just lean on their strengths.
mhm.
So then they're self-reflecting. They're identifying like, okay, what am I strong at? I'd like to do this. And
Yeah.
then they have to put it all together.
And then we use solo journaling games as reflection pieces.
God, solo journaling games are really cool, but I've only played like horror ones. I haven't played anything that's a little bit lighter in theme.
Yeah,
Ooh,
I mean, some of them I came across were in that bundle. Like, oh yeah, I could use this in the classroom. This is reflecting about like me and like how I've changed over time and stuff like that. So it's
right.
like especially like the really small indie games are great for stuff like that.
You wouldn't actually think that that's oh wow, that's you wouldn't think that like a journaling game would be something that you could pitch as like a game. Like this is something that we're going to play as a
Yeah.
game. Because it's like, "Oh, we're just going to write a journal." Because I remember back in school we had to do that all the time. But if it was pitched as like, "Hey, this is a game and you're going to get prompts and there is going to be fiction involved or maybe just self-reflection involved." I feel like my engagement or my willingness to actually do this would have been
Mhm.
much higher. I every time I talk about education in games, I know I shouldn't. I feel regret over when I was even born. I'm like, it would have been awesome to be like a student now because I feel like now more than ever, kids have more control over. I wouldn't say like their future because the world is on fire, but I think kids have far more control over how they learn and the direction of the learning. I know that there are a lot of old school teachers who are resistant to that, but there are a lot more younger teachers who entered the
Mhm.
profession because of their passion for teaching. And they are bringing their passions for like music, games, art into their classroom and incorporating that into literally everything else that they're responsible for. And I just think that's really cool. I know that, a lot of companies out there will send games to schools or send
Mhm.
kits to schools to kind of help them set up their like D&D club. I think there are a lot of those now, especially in the States. I don't know about your
Mhm.
school.
Uh, it's just me at my school.
Oh, so not yet, but one day you're gonna be the
Yeah.
games teacher. That's kind of cool. So I gotta ask, and I want to know like a teacher's thoughts on this. Like you're a grade fourth and fifth grade teacher.
Mhm.
One of the things that we talk about in RPGs is that like the really great thing about them is that it's totally okay to fail. And
Yeah.
like in tabletop RPGs, we see this in actual plays and everything like that, even in the D&D movie, right?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay. There's like it very perfectly captures the experience of playing D&D with real people. Like people like messing up all the time or people like getting the rules wrong or really holding each other back, but you have to work together. But in TTRPGs, like failure is as safe as success and
Mhm.
sometimes more entertaining than success. And you've talked about like journaling games and a lot of these like one pagers or you know zine RPGs.
Mhm.
Are Is this something that you're seeing where like, hey, failure is important. Failure is something that we have to, you know,
I mean,
understand and react to at that
I try
grade.
to bring that into the entire classroom because
Yeah.
I think it's a really important skill, like learning how to fail and realizing that failure doesn't have to be awful.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think games are really, really good at teaching that. So I've been running the Wild Sea for some of my students,
Mhm.
and I had one student who like he struggles to be engaged sometimes. Like he really has a tough time, and he just kind of like his thoughts wander, and he's just kind of off in his own little world sometimes. But once I started introducing more game stuff, like I just saw his creativity turn on, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
he's like coming up with all this stuff, but he still laughs about this like a catastrophic failure that his character had the first time he played the Wild Sea.
That's awesome.
And it's something that we go back to and just laugh about. And because of that, and I think like, building rapport and building relationships with other like his classmates and stuff like that, it's like he's much more interested in just like trying stuff out now.
Yeah. Because you don't have that fear of failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, for me growing up, I don't I suspect that many many children of the Asian diaspora can relate to this. But growing up, you make one mistake and you're basically held to that mistake for your like entire life.
Oh yeah.
It's like, remember when you were 12 years old and you did this wrong? Make sure you don't do that
Yeah.
now. I'm 33. I'm not,
Yeah.
right? Or like, hey, I had this awful teacher. Education RPGs is really important to me because I've seen how it can help kids, and I've seen how traditional education has failed kids,
Mhm.
and it saddens me. I had a teacher in the 8th grade, Miss Segator, and that's a very villain-like name. Um, she was a big part of my childhood, in that I had to unlearn a lot of the experiences that I had with this teacher, because I was a kid with undiagnosed learning disabilities.
Mhm.
This was the 8th grade was also when I got glasses
Oh.
and I couldn't see the board. And I didn't think
Mhm.
that something was wrong.
Yeah. Well, how could you? It was just that
How
was
could
just
I? Right?
normal.
Just your vision just slowly starts to go. And I remember doing an after school meeting with my 8th grade teacher and my parents. And she told my parents that there is a chance that Daniel's not going to go to high school.
Oh my God.
And I'm there. And this is after I've struggled up until this point. I had a really great teacher in the 6th grade, Mr. Lewis, who said to my parents, who relayed this to me when I was an adult, he said, when Daniel's ready, he'll be fine. But I only had one teacher like that. And I didn't really
That's
thrive until I got implicated in my learning, until I became engaged in it. That wasn't until second year university.
which I mean, that is such a common story and a huge
Yeah.
failing of our educational system. And it's a thing I see still happening. And I'm not going to say that I am the perfect teacher that catches all my students, but I think trying to meet students where they are is such an important piece of being a good teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And people aren't willing to do that, right? I It's gonna get heavy for like 2 minutes. So you can skip ahead 2 minutes. And I'm looking at the timer right now, 2 minutes. Um, so I had a student who I taught for 3 years at the ROM. It was in the D&D program that I ran at the
Mhm.
ROM. And bright kid, so bright. Like, parents were super supportive. They traveled the world together. They made sure that their kid really was engaged. Like, they engaged with what he was interested in. He's super bright, always at the front of the line, always asking questions. Really
Mhm.
like clever but chaotic D&D player, like a model student. And aged out of my program, went to high school, and the pandemic happened.
Mm.
And along with high school came the pressure of, you need to know exactly what you're going to do with your future. I still don't know what I want to do with my future, right? Like,
I
and I've
mean,
got like a job and like all this stuff. I still don't know what I
right.
want to do with my future because I don't know what's going on with the world. Um, but uh, about a year into the pandemic, he just couldn't take it anymore, and was online learning, struggling with one class and the pressure of like, oh, I have to do well in grade 11 and grade 12, and just decided to end it. And
Wow.
that happened. And I'm still in touch with, you know, his mother, who was like a huge
Mhm.
supporter of mine. We keep in touch, we check in on each other, and it rocked me. It rocked me hard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And for me, it was like, how could this bright kid who was so engaged in my classroom, so into learning, with a like the perfect family, the parents who just let him do what he wanted to do, like
Mhm.
indulged in his interests, had good boundaries, right? communicated. Like online learning broke them, and that pressure of like, and we'll never know what the real cause is, right?
Yeah.
But like being online, being isolated, and then having the pressure of having to decide your future.
Yeah. In a time of particular uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only relate to like a fraction of that. I mean, like I
Hmm.
basically restarted my life after I dropped out of grad school. Like I have a master's in archaeology and I'm 6 years into my PhD in archaeology. Now I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I need to
Yeah.
drop out and then I need to find out where I'm gonna land. And I feel like I'm in grade 11 again. I'm like, okay, what do I do
Hmm.
now? I have to
Yeah.
think about my future. Except now I'm able to not only comprehend the disappointment that is being, you know, pushed my way by my family, but I'm also old enough and experienced enough to understand that I have to compare myself to everybody else in the world, or I'm being told that I should. And I feel like games were like a big part of me kind of healing.
Mm.
And when used in schools, I feel like games are a really great tool to make sure that kids are still passionate about their sort of learning experience,
Hmm.
still hopeful about the future, still able to make meaningful connection with each other, right? Because I mean, they're what's it? Those the four C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity.
Yeah.
When I think back to all of the schooling that I've done, I can't think of a time when all four of those things coexisted as at once.
I mean, the creativity piece is one that is particularly rare
Yeah,
unless you are in a like creative field. And I use a scare quotes for creative because
yeah, yeah.
I mean everything has a creative element.
Right.
Like I like coming up with like figuring out how to solve a math problem requires a kind of creativity, even though we don't often talk about it as creative.
It's true.
But
I've seen those videos of kids from around the world approaching the same math problem using the
mhm,
methods that they're taught in their country. And it's wild. Like, why don't we do
well,
that?
I mean, like I taught in Taiwan for a few years. I taught in Japan as well,
Mm,
and it's so interesting when I think about like how my students approach problem solving, and especially like my Japanese high school students. Whenever I asked them to do something that was creative, they struggled. Not because they weren't creative, but they just hadn't really been asked to be creative in a school setting, and so they
yeah.
weren't sure like what the expectations were, or weren't sure like how to do it right.
Yeah, because we're taught that, and this goes back to that whole thing about our aversion to failure,
Yeah,
right? We can't
yeah.
fail. And I know that there are, especially in like East Asia, you know, other cultural pressures that we don't understand. I mean,
Mhm.
in China, they've got the equivalent of the SATs, but like 100 times harder and 100 times more important to your future than the SATs in the United
a, a
States.
much a much larger, I think, impact on future opportunities.
Yeah, so much so that there are pictures online of tutoring centers where kids are hooked up to IVs so they can study. I remember, and this was actually with Emma, who you met at Breakout Con.
Oh yeah.
Um, we were in Beijing and happened to be around when high school students were doing the like practice tests, and there
Hmm.
were parents camped outside of this school with cameras and like those like camping chairs waiting for
Yeah.
their kids to come out because they want to know how well they did on this practice
Wow.
test.
Yeah. That's so much pressure.
And I remember when the gates opened up. And I say gates because it's very
Yeah.
much like a prison. Like when the gates opened up, these kids looked dejected. And that kind of pressure is can break any person.
Oh.
And the
Oh.
idea that like
Absolutely.
your family's success, your legacy is just riding on you. All of that is riding on you
Hmm.
will make anyone scared to try something where the outcome is uncertain, right? And
Yeah.
that's when it's like, I want you to be creative. What's the right way to be creative? What are you looking for? How am I
Yeah.
being graded on this? And that doesn't happen in games because those four C's, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, are all the fundamental components of playing a tabletop RPG,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
right? And so I kind of wanted to pivot and I wanted to ask you, and
Yeah.
I brought some too. What are some games that you would recommend to people? Not just for like the fourth and fifth grade class you teach, and you could say
Mhm.
your own games because I'm going to say one of your games. Um, but what are some games that you would recommend?
And honestly, Told by Starlight is really effective in the classroom. I've used it with lots of different classes, lots of different ages. And while my kind of approach to the game, like building up to playing the game itself, is a bit different,
Right.
um, there's a lot to tap into. I mean, so Told by Starlight is a game about drawing constellations and making mythology. You dr- draw dots on a page, connect those dots to make constellations, and then you tell a story about it. And you use a deck of playing cards, which gives you extra little prompts just to get help set the scene.
Yeah.
But I mean, the obvious tie-in is just world mythology, and it's also a really really easy way to have different cultures represented in the classroom. Because as you start talking about
Yeah.
mythology, like I've got students who are newcomers to Canada, students whose parents moved to Canada but they were born here, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I know this story, I've heard this fable, I've heard this tall tale, and it all kind of comes out because mythology is not unique to any particular culture,
Yeah.
and so you have this easy tie-in, and then reading other cultures' stories, but then with the drawing. Uh, I know a class that used it and then used it to practice using a protractor and measuring angles
Oh yeah.
because they've drawn these constellations. But you get this added like this is how people like can navigate by stars and chart stars. It's by taking these measurements. So it's not just that you're doing this thing that's just pretend. Like you are acting like a real mathematician.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there's also this added layer of like, when we look up at the stars, or in the case of Told by Starlight, when you're looking at that black sheet of paper with all of the dots all over, it's just like people from around the world looking up at the stars in ancient times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody's interpreting the stars in their own way. And what you're doing is you're basically putting it all on a shared canvas,
Yeah.
which is really, really cool. If you weren't going to talk about your own game, I was going to talk about it. Because, I mean, as an adult, I had a great experience with it because I contributed 2 constellations, I
You did.
remember. And the first time I was like, oh, I don't play a lot of games where I have to be artistic
Mm-hmm.
because I always play to my strengths and like I like to world build. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I remember the first time being like, oh, I'm not sure. And then the second time being a lot more confident with it. And I can't imagine doing this in a classroom, but on like a really large scale with a ton of people and then keeping that like you've done on your wall behind you
Yeah.
and then using that for other lessons. Like, okay, let's talk about, you know, world mythology. Let's talk about something from every culture that's represented in our classroom. Let's let's talk about, the stars. Let's talk about space. Right? Like
Yes.
what
Oh
is a
yes.
star? Now we're going to talk about chemistry. Like dude,
That's exactly the
so
point, right?
good.
And using the game as kind of like an anchor point, it's something that because the students helped create it, they
Hmm.
have an investment. It's like that session zero where you do a bit of world building with everybody. All of a sudden, the whole table has this investment. Well, it's the same thing in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, you
And then
created something.
like we did something like Told by Starlight, which I basically adapted, but we had a giant map that was like in the middle of the room that we kept adding to,
Oh, I love
and
that.
then and it was like a big world building game,
Yeah.
and they took on different roles, and but like they were all invested in this community. Like it's inspired by like Total Starlight, but also I took a lot of cues from things like The Quiet Year,
I was just about to
and
say, it sounds like the quiet year.
yeah,
Man.
and yes, I mean I think Told by Starlight works well, but also The Quiet Year can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, Quiet Year's a really good one. Another one, if you're into like world building, that I would recommend is Microscope. Have you played that before?
Oh, oh, I love
Yeah,
Microscope.
so like Microscope, like I have a physical copy. I love this game so much. Microscope is a fantastic game, even if you're not in like a classroom. If you've got a home game that's been going on for like years and you need like a break, Microscope is a really cool game to play because it's all about collaboratively crafting an epic history.
Mhm.
And so you're like, oh, okay, well, a lot of people ask me, like, I get DMs all the time from people who just want like tips on how to like run their game or world build.
Mhm.
Um, I was at my LGS actually yesterday playing this a TCG called Flesh and Blood that I've recently gotten into, and afterwards I got a message on Discord on the store's server, and somebody was like an Asians represent, like
Oh,
audience member, somebody who watches us all the time. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. And a couple other people, who were in attendance started messaging me. And one of them I was talking to today, he was asking me questions about world building. And I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as world builders. If you're running a game for your home or if you're doing it professionally, like if you're in the
mhm.
industry. And I think we forget that this is a group experience. And Microscope is a really, really, really great way to step back from like an existing game, an existing story, to
Mhm.
involve everybody else in it, to get everybody else as engaged. Because we can go and, write out this epic history of your land, but if the players don't care or the players don't know, then it serves no purpose to the
Yeah.
to the table. But
I
Microscope is a
mean,
great way to do that.
Microscope is fantastic. I actually have an Wuxia inspired game of Microscope on the go right
Really?
now.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
because we wanted to. It was like an exploration of like how can we turn Microscope into like a big like an action game,
Yeah.
and
Battles, big
yeah,
political events.
like all these like reveals and like the reframing of power levels.
Yeah. Ooh, you could,
Yeah.
because you could do like the whole cultivator's journey through Microscope. I
Oh, you
never thought
could.
about that. That's really cool. And I think like even as a standalone game, if it's not a supplement to something you're already doing, Microscope is a really cool way to get people thinking about history, right?
Hmm.
And how, the victors, like, are the ones who write history. But in this case, like, you could do like Told by Starlight. Let's talk about like the mythology of this world. And then let's take everything we know from that and then let's craft the history of the people.
Yeah.
Literally the history under the stars. Ooh. Um, and I think, yeah, so for me, like Microscope is a really big one. But, we've been talking a lot about social skills and um like art. And I know that there are a lot of people who will want like, well, what about a more traditional tabletop role playing
Hmm.
experience? I've picked three. Um, one of them is actually by another educator named Marshall Miller. It's a game called The Warren. I don't know. Have you played this one?
Oh yes, I haven't played it, but I've heard of it and I've read some stuff about it.
The Warren is a fantastic game. It's like Watership Down, but it's written by a scientist. And it's a powered by the Apocalypse game, so it's rules light, it's incredibly collaborative. But I played this in the classroom, and it was an incredible way to teach science.
Mm.
We at the ROM, we had this person come into like the office, like for like the teachers, and she had a basket of bunnies, and just like came in unsolicited to basically just like pitch a program. And she just had a basket full of literal live rabbits. And it was like the weirdest thing. And I was telling my students that this happened, and they were just like enthralled that somebody could just walk into the museum with a basket full of rabbits, go to an office, and be like, hey, here's my pitch. And I ran the Warren for a group of my students who were interested. And in the scenario, they were the rabbits who had been brought into the museum.
Hmm.
And what we did was, as we were playing every single scene, when we moved from one part of the museum to the next, we actually took our game to that part of the museum.
Oh, that's
And they
awesome.
had to engage with like the physical space that they were in, but also think about the perspective of a rabbit
Hmm.
and also learn about, okay, well, what are these rabbits capable of? You know, how can I actually reach this thing? Can I jump from here? What are the things that I might actually perceive as dangerous
Hmm.
being a rabbit in a natural history museum? And it was a really, really cool experience doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
Do you have any others? I have like a list, so I want to know if there are any
Uh,
others that you have.
so I know I've been talking about the Wild Sea a lot. I was a contributing writer on it.
Bless, that's awesome.
And
Go buy it
and
now.
and Felix is a dear, dear friend. Uh, in fact, the first supplement's on Kickstarter right now.
Is
But
it?
oh
Okay, I'll have to
yes,
link it. I'll have to link it. Okay,
which I'm
you'll have to send me the
also
link
right.
after, and then I'll put it in the show notes.
Perfect. Uh, but I've been playing it in the classroom. It's another one that actually ends up being really effective for science
Mm.
because the setting itself is the world was taken over by a forest, and you play wild sailors who sailed through the tops of trees on chainsaw powered ships.
Yep.
It's a big, beautiful, weird world. And with one of my GMs in training, she set up this thing about this like giant centipede
Oh yeah.
attacking attacking a town. And at one point, she says, "What eats centipedes?" I'm like, oh, let's look this up. And we start looking it up, and we're looking at different centipedes, and we're looking at like predators and prey and all this stuff.
Right.
And then she's like, "Yeah, the centipede is trying to run away because a spider is coming. A giant spider
Oh,
is coming
super
to
cool.
attack." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's great. One, super exciting for me as a player. Like, oh, there's so much
Yeah.
here to like to rock with." But I was just like, she like, again, if we talk about engagement, right? Very naturally, just it sparked her own curiosity, and
Yeah.
that curiosity led to her own research.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
And I'm sure if I went to her today and asked, like, "Oh, what are some things that eat centipedes?" she would be able to give me a list.
That's super cool. That's yeah. That's I don't need like I would imagine some birds. I guess it would depend on the type of
Yeah.
centipede as well, because there
Mm-hmm.
were like giant centipedes, and then there's some that are non venomous, at least to humans. Yeah, like that line of thinking I think is really important. I mean, when
I
people
mean,
are world building, like even if you aren't in that like this instant of telling a story with others, if you're prepping for a story, just the amount of research that you could do
mm-hmm.
is like incredible, especially if it was in the classroom.
Oh yeah. I mean, we I was able to tie that into our like our unit on biodiversity and ecosystems,
Yep.
which I then just reinforces the world building because it's not just these things in isolation. You have these things that interact with other things in their environment, which
Of
interact with other
course.
things, and all of a sudden, like we're talking about these like rich like ecosystems, and I like our school's not far from the Don Valley.
Okay.
It's like when we went for a walk down there, it's like, oh yeah, we're like looking at noticing all these things, and like it's easy to tie it back to the Wild Sea because it's all about exploration in this kind of like very like this verdant world, and it just
Yeah.
invites coming up with these like interesting creatures, but how do they interact with the rest of the world?
Absolutely. I do this thing where if I'm on like TikTok or some sort of like fast algorithm based social media, if I see something really interesting related to nature, I will
Mhm.
always look it up and save it.
Yeah.
And the most recent one is actually a type of bee that's native to Australia, primarily around Queensland, and they make a very interesting hive that I feel like you might really like. The
I'm
scientific
intrigued.
so the scientific name is Tetragonula hawkinsii. So they're a stingless bee. They're black, and their hives look like something out of Lovecraft and sci-fi.
All right, I'm gonna have to look this up afterwards
Yeah,
because
I'll send you some
that
stuff.
sounds fantastic. Yes, yes,
They
please.
their hives look incredible, and like the video I saw was of I guess a beekeeper, somebody removing the hive, opening up a plastic garbage bin, And the hive had this, or it wasn't honeycomb. First of all, it wasn't honeycomb. It had this organic look to it. Like it was this lattice, like this fleshy lattice that was
Hmm.
built within the confines of this garbage can. And it had the same sort of aesthetic as the flood from Halo. Like all of
Oh,
like how they take over ships and stuff and take
yeah,
over
yeah, yeah.
worlds, and these tendrils, these veins basically spreading out in an
Super cool.
oddly and it's something that look in a really organic yet purposeful way.
Hmm.
And I do this every single time I see something neat on social media when it comes to an animal because I'm like, I can incorporate this into something even in the future. Like there's a type of viper that has a rattle adaptation where the scales on its rattle or the scales at the end of its tail, I shouldn't say rattle, protrude in a way that
Hmm.
looks like an insect.
Oh,
And
yes.
and they sit on cliffs and they wave their tail around and wait for birds to come and try to eat the insect and they
I've
eat the
seen videos
birds.
of that.
Like so cool. Um and just like seeing that sort of stuff inspires me to be like, I want to put this in a game.
Oh, me too.
Like I want to write
Easy.
this into something. I was at the local game store the other day. There's a store in my area called the Sword and Board.
Oh, I don't
Um,
know that one.
they sell a lot of like they're the only store that I've seen in actually the city that sells a lot of like OSR products in physical format.
Oh, cool.
And they also have boxes and boxes and boxes of vintage RPGs. Um,
Fun.
they're primarily what I go there for. But I saw a game called Fungi of the Far Realms, and it was like a supplement. And I opened it up; it was beautifully bound, like it was a hardcover, but the material was almost like that, that fabric hardcover.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that rough, coarse sort of fabric hardcover.
Hmm.
I opened it up, and it was just a book of these beautiful water and oil painting fungi with
That's
little narrative prompts that you could use to put them in your game. And it was basically like reading a field guide for a fantasy
that's
world.
awesome.
And it was so cool. And I looked at it and I was like, I need this. And I need more of this. Can you imagine if somebody went and just made field guides for fictional worlds? Like with no context.
I mean, immediately you say that, and I'm just like, oh, I could do that with my students.
Yeah. a hundred
Like, we could
percent.
make little field guides based on different environments just around the school, even.
Yeah. Like you could go and take like you can have a prompt. It'd be like, okay, we're gonna look
Yeah.
at this part of like, the playground. Be like, okay, what do we see here? What are the different like okay, with dandelions, we're seeing like
Hmm.
garlic mustard, we're seeing grass, what kind of trees are we seeing? What type of birds are in the air? Okay, cool. How would somebody from another world interpret these? I
Yeah.
think that prompt alone would be super interesting because you could make a
Oh,
collection of
absolutely.
essentially alien life forms. Like I guess the exercise would be okay. Well, what if you were an alien and you came down to Earth and you saw these things that were around us, like things that we take for granted?
We're kind of going the other way in my class right now, because we started talking about um, systems in the body in science.
Oh, cool.
But I'm doing it through like a sci-fi lens.
Okay.
So like whenever we do it, like I put on like the Enterprise like hum of the spaceship
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
background sound, and I call them all doctors. Like, oh, you guys are the expert scientists. We're going to like create a new life form, but we need to understand how biology works in order to do this.
The systems.
Yeah, and so we're like researching about like, the respiratory system and the nervous system and all this, and we're gonna finish it off. I'm gonna try and get the spore creature creator,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and then have them like design their own creatures.
Have you played Cleorama?
No.
Okay, so this is you're gonna look. I'm gonna send this to you later. In an old issue of Dragon magazine,
Hmm.
there was like a 2-pager for a game called Cleorama, and it was literally about using modeling clay like Play-Doh to make and battle your own creatures and monsters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so good.
yeah. It's so good, right? Because that's exactly your project.
Oh
But this
yeah,
was in
easy.
the official D&D magazine, Clayorama. It's fantastic. I was talking about this on an episode of No Dice No Problem, which is like
Yeah.
sort of variety show, and I was telling Drew about a genre of game that I've become enthralled with called the Bronstein, and
Oh.
it's one that I've never played because it's not really played at cons, like widely played at cons anymore. But it is the game that scholars consider to be the prototype for tabletop role playing,
Hmm.
and it is literally rules light. It'd be perfect for a classroom because the composition of the classroom is exactly what the game should be. You could
Hmm.
have up to 24 players. You have one referee. There are really like no rules, and everybody just gets a pre-generated character with an established set of motivations or objectives. You, the teacher, basically say, "Hey, this is the scenario." Everybody has their rules, and if you're able to accomplish your objectives, you can win. But what's neat is that at specific times, you say, okay, you have to issue orders to me, the referee. And
Hmm.
you would have like a board in the middle of the classroom or whatnot. And what every student would do is in character, they would write down what their character is going to be doing based on the
Mm.
social alliances that they have made.
Oh, I
And
did
then
something
you
like
read
this,
their
but
orders,
continue.
it changes the scenario, and then we go back to it. So
Yeah,
easy to do in a
that's
classroom.
that's. I mean, yeah. So I did something like that,
Yeah.
but the students weren't. They didn't have individual characters, but
Right.
they in like groups of like two or three were in charge of small communities,
Mm, okay. Yeah.
and they were tracking things like happiness and
Cool.
um and security and all these things, and they had access to different resources.
I
And
like
so
that.
there's one student who's like started going around and just like taking a survey of what resources everybody had access to. Because I
Oh.
could put a big hex map up, and I said, okay,
Yeah.
like, and I was like, okay, choose a hex that like where your settlement is, and then like let's talk about what might exist in that area, and so go into geography and
Of course.
biology. But so there's kids like going around doing surveys, trying to figure out like who has what, so they can make better trades.
Oh my
And
god,
then
that's
another
awesome.
kid, and then another kid starts like, "Can I attack another group?" And I
Oh.
say, "You can, but there might be consequences. Like, what are you going to do?" It's like it's not up to me. And what ended up happening was like as word got out that this one group of like the rabble rousers
Yeah.
were like planning to attack, other groups just like they made a peace treaty and an alliance with other groups, and they're like, okay, if they attack any of us, we'll all protect each other. And it's like I mean, this is global politics right here,
Yeah, this is you've got model UN right now.
right? And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to say no to any of this, but if you do this, people aren't going to be happy.
Yeah, I mean there are consequences to their actions and they're going to learn in a safe space to learn, right?
Yeah,
If you attack somebody, people will wage war on you. But not literally, but in a game that you're
yeah.
invested in, right? I That's really cool. I have another atypical recommendation.
Oh,
Um
I'm very curious.
I feel like it's a game you would really like. It would not be good. You know what? I'm not going to make that decision for you. I don't know if it would be good for your classroom. It's a LARP.
Ooh,
It's a game called Winterhorn. Do you know this game?
I don't.
Okay.
I've never actually participated in a LARP, despite desperately wanting to.
I've only been in one LARP, and it was not for Winterhorn. I actually bought this at Breakout Con, like Breakout Con 2018 or something.
Oh,
And I have yet to play it, but I really want to.
well, I'm down.
Winterhorn's really cool because it's it's a game about how law enforcement and government agents undermine activists. That
Ooh.
is like the core theme of it. It's about how like government entities basically destroy activist groups. And in the game, you actually play as law enforcement, and your goal is to basically reflect on like weak points in activism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game about social skills, but also like the world and how we engage with
Mm-hmm.
politics. I don't know if that would be good for fourth and fifth grade, but I think this would be a very cool tool in like university, high school.
I can see adapting it because it's like this year there was a one of the unions went on strike, and it was like
Yeah,
all of the like the it wasn't the teachers that were on who were on strike, but it was like uh EAs and like dedicated early childhood educators,
yeah,
the caretaking staff, all these people who like make the schools run.
yeah. Essential.
And when they were on strike, so the kids had all these questions. So we started reading articles about the strike and what's going on.
Wow.
But because like so this stuff is, I mean, it's still relevant, and they hear stories about things going on, or they'll like go downtown and they'll see some kind of demonstration.
Yeah,
And so I mean, I'd have to look at the content itself to, like, it might be have to be adapted um for the age group, but I also think that we don't give kids enough credit sometimes.
yeah. That's totally fair. I mean, that's why I was like, I'm not sure. I want to know from
Uh,
you because
yeah,
yeah,
I'm not to investigate that.
it's a really cool game by Bully Pulpit Games, who
Oh, do
all
love Bully Public Games.
yeah, who also publishes The Warren, and another recommendation of mine, Night Witches,
Oh yes,
like
yes, yes.
another like great
Perfect.
history game,
Yeah,
right?
because there's
Incredible
also that
history game.
game that I considered using in my class. You may have heard of it though. It's called Ross Rifles.
Oh yeah, I love Ross rifles. I love Ross rifles. That's a great one. I should get some copies to you. Um, I yeah, I mean wrote Ross rifles for use in the classroom.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I remember reading the quick start got like the like a few years ago.
way back when it was really poorly laid out by me.
But
Oh God,
I
I
remember
was
reading and being like, oh, there's a lot of really good stuff in here and stuff that I could easily use in a classroom.
well. I should get you some copies of the books because we have quite a few. I
Oh,
I remember the first playtest that we did of Ross rifles was actually in my classroom, and it was on Remembrance Day. Remembrance
very
Day,
appropriate.
2017. If whatever Remembrance Day fell on a Saturday, but it was
Mhm.
pre-pandemic. I'm pretty sure it was 2017. Um, and what we did was we actually went on a tour of the nearby U of T campus, University of Toronto,
Mhm.
for those who aren't in Toronto, um, looking at the World War One monuments. And you can actually go
Oh,
into
yeah, yeah.
the clock tower, the bell tower, and they have a
Mhm.
little museum there. And so I did a lesson on the First World War, and literally 2 weeks before, two of my staff, Patrick and also named Daniel, Patrick, Daniel, and I, we basically put together some Powered by the Apocalypse rules for Ross rifles. And we basically briefed all of my staff and volunteers on how to run this because we had done PBTA games before.
Okay.
And we basically ran the entire Battle of Vimy Ridge.
Oh
Um,
my god. Oh, that
but
is.
each table with the respective GMs was a squad, and they all had their own objectives to try to contribute to this battle. And the great thing
Oh,
about
that's.
World War One is that, like, and a World War Two game, is that we already know what happens, right?
Mhm.
But we don't know what happened to individual characters, individual like soldiers and their stories. So that's what makes this like games like this really fun to do, because it's like, yeah, we know the outcome, but we don't know what happens to your character. We don't know what happens to
Mhm.
your story, because your
And
story is independent of the outcome of the battle.
I mean, and that what is a great tool to also do things like building empathy and imagining other
Yeah.
points of view. And just like, oh, that is good. That is
Yeah,
good.
and like one of the things like we wanted to do was also, I mean, if you look at your, and this is again me remembering my school experience, so I don't know if things have changed, so please correct me. But if you look at like a textbook, or really any mass-produced book about the First World War, you really just see white people.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so still the same. You really
I
only see
mean,
white people, and like you go to a museum, you go into the galleries, and that's all you see. And so we made a concerted effort to make sure that there was an entire section in the book about the marginalized communities that fought for the Canadian
mhm,
Expeditionary Forces, so that people could actually go and make characters and be like, well, I want to play an Asian character, but also understand that that is also grounded in reality.
mhm. It's
Um,
not
yeah.
it's not a fictionalized. I mean, that part isn't fictionalized.
Correct. Yeah. Your character could exist. And this is where, we were really clear about like you are telling your own story, but we are providing you with the tools required to sort of ground it in the reality of World War One.
Hmm.
And we
Like,
spent a lot of time like we went to the Canadian War Museum. We spent a ton of time in the archives there. I spent like 6 hours with one of the armorers. They're handling the guns and all of the
oh,
trench
that's so
trench
cool.
art. Trench art is so cool. And
I
they
never even
had
thought about that, but
oh my god. There were these one of the most striking pieces I've ever seen was an artillery shell, like the casing of an artillery shell. And it had blown open and it had like blossomed out like a flower. And these soldiers had actually like, I don't know, used some sort of sharp tool to basically pound in decorations in Chinese.
oh, oh, that's so cool.
And I don't know if it's actually on display in the museum because it was in their archives, but they have an incredible amount of trench art there. And like the idea of having multiple dog tags on. Because a lot
Hmm.
of people think, oh, I just wear one around your neck. It's actually commonplace in the First World War for families to offer a present of a wrist tag for really
Mm,
morbid reasons. Because a lot of people who were killed, their torsos were destroyed. And so if you found an arm, there's a higher chance of people knowing
right.
that you didn't make it back, or at
Yeah.
least getting an answer about your fate.
Hmm.
And seeing these things in real life were like, it was a very, very, I guess, a morbid, saddening experience, but also something that we wanted to document in this with like, hey, these are things you can give your character.
Hmm.
And this is why people use them in real life. And I mean, you see this in all games about history. Night Witches has an incredible, I mean, at least like half of the book is a history book.
Hmm.
But you're learning about it as you're playing the game. Like you said, it's a game first.
Yes.
It's a game
And
first. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway for me from this. It's like when we're making something educational, it's got to be a game first.
because, like, all of a sudden, you could have a student who wants to play the game, and as a result, starts learning history.
Yeah. Have you in your classroom, have you ever used Minecraft Education Edition?
Oh, I use it a lot. I use
That
it a
is such an
lot.
incredible tool. I don't know why more people don't talk about it. It is
I th-
so cool. It's because it's just Minecraft, the Minecraft every kid knows,
yep.
but with literal chemistry built into it. They have the periodic table. You can create elements.
Hmm.
You do math. It's
Oh, I
such a
mean,
cool tool.
I start with a few students. So I do like a genius hour. I call it creativity burst because I don't. I just have to put my mark on everything I do.
Of course. Branding.
But it's like it is a chance where like they just take on their own personal projects. And there are a couple of students who are like, we're going to learn how to use Redstone,
Oh my God.
and
Yeah.
so I started talking like, okay, we started talking about like logic gates,
Hmm.
and it was complex. I mean, they didn't know a whole lot of it, but like they were suddenly interested in like, yeah, this logic is also how just computers work, which is why you can build a virtual computer in Minecraft.
The things that I've seen people do with Minecraft is absolutely mind blowing.
It's
Mind blowing. Like there are like, and yes, Microsoft, big corporation and whatnot, but there are these pre-made modules that teachers can get for free if they have an access to like
mhm.
Minecraft Education Edition. And there is one that I've explored a lot of, and it's a chemistry classroom. And there are literal game tools like crafting tables where you can craft elements. and you can go and you can
Super
make
cool.
helium, and you can go and you can make latex, and you can make a balloon, and you can actually fill a balloon in Minecraft with helium and tie it to an animal, and the animals fly. And you could do all of this within a game that kids already know how to play. Like you
Hmm.
can go and you can program things in Minecraft now, and
I mean,
it's
the
wild.
biggest challenge I think is actually the teacher more than the student,
Yeah, because I
because
guess the teacher needs to know how to
like
play Minecraft.
within my school, like I'm probably the only teacher who knows how to play Minecraft,
Branding. But yeah,
right?
it's a challenge though, I guess, because if you're a teacher and you don't know how to play TTRPGs, you've never done that before, and
Hmm.
somebody gives you like okay, we're gonna play Told by Starlight. What? I,
Yeah.
I guess that's a big challenge, and you know what? It's actually related to another question that we had from our patrons. Kat asked,
Mhm.
for folks who don't have connections to the education industry, and I will say also maybe don't have connections to TTRPGs. Um, for people who aren't connected to education, who aren't teachers, who aren't support staff, who aren't friends of teachers, and want to be involved with bringing TTRPGs to a classroom, what's the best way to approach that? Like, you're the only teacher in your school who knows how to play Minecraft. I would assume that that might also extend to TTRPGs.
Yeah. I mean, no, there's one other teacher who I know plays D&D regularly.
Another Ryan
One.
Con. Okay, so there's two teachers at your school, but what if you're a parent and you don't have, the one true Ryan Con as the teacher of your children, right? How do you, a TTRPG fan, bring that to the classroom? How do you bridge that conversation? How do you bring that to a teacher? Because I know
I
that there is
think
a lot of pride in being a teacher, and I've seen this firsthand because Asian Tiger Mom growing up, like my mom thought she could teach better than my teachers. How do you kind of bring that to a classroom without criticizing a teacher? How do you even donate materials? What is the best way to even approach a school, even if you aren't a parent and you want to just, and you're a designer maybe?
I mean, the first thing is like it's gonna be your pitch. Like so many things, it's gonna be your
Of
pitch.
course.
Um, but a lot of schools would love to have a volunteer coming in once a week to like run a small club or something like that.
Oh, like an after school like D&D club or
Like
whatever.
after school or a lunchtime club or something like that. Um, or like if you have a kid or a kid you're connected to, and you can go into a class and do like a workshop. Because I've done this kind of like a morning where we play a whole bunch of games, and then
Mm,
an afternoon where you take what we played and then like do something with that. Like take some of the mechanics or take some of the themes, the ideas, and then put it into your own game in the afternoon. Um, like I'm super open. Like if people like wanted to come in and like they had like a full program that it's like, oh yeah, I could do this thing. It's gonna look like this. I mean, I would be down for stuff like that.
yeah. Or like if you were like a game designer, could you go and just donate a whole bunch of books to like the library? Could you do
Oh,
that?
easy, easy. Yeah.
I mean, we're in Canada. I know it's a little bit different in some parts of the United States,
Yeah, yes.
unfortunately. But
I
we're
will
talking about
only speak
Canada.
for I'll only speak to my experience as a teacher, which is not a universal experience.
Yeah,
But
unfortunately.
I mean, if you could like going to a school's librarian and say like, here's this really cool book, and like taking the time to like, talk about it and being able to express how this could be a benefit to the school community,
Yeah.
I think most people would be really receptive to something like that. You might have now you have all the problems with like budgets and timing, and I'm
Of
not saying it would
course.
be an easy path, but if it's something that you're generally genuinely passionate about, uh, like I know one of my students, his dad sent him to a D&D like a camp for a weekend,
Oh yeah.
and he was trying to explain it to me. I'm like, no, 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 don't worry, we're good. But like seeing seeing a parent who's like he didn't know much about it, but he knew that it might be something that his kid would like. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like following that same kind of thing. It's like if you can present this as a thing that would be like educational and fun and easy for the teacher.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It has to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Huh.
It there are opportunities, and like honestly, just like I pitched something like this when I was in teachers college of doing a like an after school games club, but I pitched it as things like collaborative storytelling, and it and I talked to like pointed towards things like it's going to have drama skills and art skills, and there's going to be math in there and language, plus all of the like the wealth of social skills, etc.,
Mm.
etc. And it was a pretty easy sell. Like immediately they're like, oh yeah, and like I gave them an outline. It's like, yeah, we would start with we're gonna start with fiasco actually.
And wow, are we just like this is not sponsored by Bully Pulpit or anything?
Right?
Yeah.
But Fiasco was an easy sell as it's like, oh, it's an improv game and
Yeah.
it's all about like the yes and collaboration. It's the spin.
Mm.
And I mean, at least like with games, I don't think it's disingenuous. It's
That's
just
true.
knowing where to put the spotlight.
Yeah, 100%. I think being able to articulate how it ties into the curriculum or ties into the core skills that these non-gamers, this non-gamer audience are looking for. Like, how do you translate your passion for a game, your passion for something you've designed or something that you know about into, well, I guess teacher jargon, right? And it goes back
Yeah.
to like really easily those four C's. Like, how does it help with communication? How does it help with collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity?
Also, I
Like, if
feel
you
like
can
anyone,
articulate that,
yeah, and if anyone out there is like, how would I do that? And you want to like shoot me a DM, like that's kind of my jam. So,
there we go. There we go. I remember the first time I ever collaborated with somebody as like a teacher.
mhm.
Their handle on Twitter is Portable City. They're also based in
Oh,
Toronto.
Shell is
Shell is awesome. That
amazing.
so Shell and I met because of Reddit, and
Oh,
I
really?
was like, yeah, and I was like working as like a doing my D&D stuff at the ROM. I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't even think that I can work in RPGs. And I remember the head of education at the museum mentioned that there was somebody on Reddit talking about the ROM's D&D thing. And I looked them up, and then I found Shell, and I got in touch with them on Twitter, and I found the budget, and I invited them to come into my class to talk
Oh, that's
about
so good.
art. And we did it in the gallery, and the kids wrote a character in our shared campaign setting, and Shell painted the character
Oh my God, that's
in
amazing.
front of the kids. So Shell was painting, and I actually have it. I still have it. I took it. But Shell was painting while we were gaming in our classroom, and the kids could just had the freedom to just get up and go and just take a look at what Shell was doing.
Oh,
And Shell
that's
would
super
like pull
cool.
some volunteers to like pose and stuff, and it was an incredible morning. But that's how easy it is. Literally reaching out to
Hmm.
somebody and asking, "Hey, like, can you like can I contribute? Hey, I've got this work. Can I donate something? Hey, I've got a
Yeah.
pitch. Here's my pitch, and here's how it aligns with the things you're looking for in your students."
Hmm.
I I've got one other one, and it's not a game for everybody. We talk about cyberpunk a lot on Asians Represented, and how like cyberpunk as a genre is extremely
It's like,
flawed in its representation of Asian cultures, right?
yeah. That.
Um, but there's a really unique game called The Veil. Another can
Oh
it's
yes, yes. I know the
um,
veil.
the Veil is interesting because your attributes are your emotions,
Hmm.
and when you're rolling and you're selecting, and you're able to select the attribute you want to use, you have to articulate how your character is feeling. And I think that is an incredibly powerful tool in a classroom because, I mean, even your home game, we need to talk more about our feelings. We need to be able to articulate
Yes.
how we're feeling because I think that is a skill that most people have not honed.
I think it's one that is in some ways almost, if not discouraged, it's kind of pushed out of focus a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not allowed to talk about our feelings, or if we do talk about our feelings, we're being dramatic.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the Veil is just like another really good example of like a safe space, an experience, a game first that encourages you to articulate your emotions, even in a fictional setting. It is literally training that core skill.
Yes.
And there are just a lot of games out there, and honestly, the big takeaway is that any game that gets a young person, gets an older person to engage with their world, engage with their surroundings, engage with those around them in a meaningful way and in an exciting and novel way is a
Hmm.
good game and is an educational
Yes.
experience. At
I
least
mean,
that's how that's
I no,
my thought.
I'm very much on the same page. I see especially public education as a chance to offer a breadth of experience to students.
Yeah.
And we don't have access to everything, but the gaming space can make some things more approachable.
Yeah.
And
100%.
I say, approachable instead of accessible to avoid the conflating it with like accessibility in terms of like individual needs.
Mhm.
But uh, because you can access fiction from a first person perspective, it gives us new insight into those experiences. It's not the same as just reading a book because as a book, like as a reader or an audience member, you have no efficacy in that world.
Right, of
But when you
course.
but when you start playing a game, you can dive into like what would I do in this situation or what would somebody do in this situation and then test it out and see how the world reacts to it.
You have agency over the story.
Yes.
Rather than being a passive participant, you are an active driver in the
Hmm.
fiction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, and it offers a new perspective that other mediums just can't do. And it's not an indictment of those mediums, it's just different things.
Yeah.
But games as a tool gives us access to all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. There are a lot of educational games out there. There are games that like specifically were designed to teach people about these things. There are games that sort of passively teach this. Honestly, any TTRPG is going to get you to work on your math skills.
Yeah.
Like for me, just like I'm not good at math, but if there are math rocks on the table, I'm gonna count those up real fast. I
It's
can
not that
go
you weren't
through that like D&D 3.5 character sheet, that Pathfinder first edition character sheet, like a spreadsheet. Like I'm there.
Listen, it's not that you're bad at math. You probably just weren't taught it in a way that made sense to you,
Yes. Yes. And
which is,
if only that were communicated to more students, right?
I mean, for a long time, I thought I was terrible at math. And then I took a symbolic logic course in university and I did quite well. And I was like, but I'm using the same type of reasoning, but I'm doing well here and I didn't do well there. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, it's because like again, it's like the personal relevance and all this stuff. But like we talked a whole bunch about in my class, probability and odds and fractions
Mm,
because we're playing dice games.
of course.
And it's like, okay, like and they're just like simple, kind of like cottage games.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right, how do you maximize this your score in this push your luck game?
Oh, I like that. I like
And
that.
the power gamers in the class were like, I need to know this.
Of course. You're going to get the min maxers. You're going to get the people who
Yeah.
love the system. And
Yeah.
then you're going to get people who love what the system produces, that narrative.
Mhm.
Um, and it's going to be good to like cater to both of those, right? And everything in
Oh
between.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that we could continue talking more about this. But honestly, what we should do is at the next Toronto Con, if there's a chance, we should host a panel. Um,
Yes, we should.
we should host a panel on this because I think that especially at cons here, we see a lot of teachers going to those
Oh yeah, a
and
ton of
just become
teachers.
fascinated with this topic of like edugaming, because I know like edugaming is like it's a buzzword. People love it, right? Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of schools don't have the budget, right? Because when people think of edugaming, they think of video games. They think of Assassin's Creed Origins, the educational
Hmm.
mode when you can go through
Yeah, where you
Egypt.
could just
Super
explore.
cool.
Oh yeah, I went to a talk at U of T a couple years ago that was specifically looking. One of the examples was at Assassin's Creed and how can video games be used as educational tools.
Yeah,
It was really
it's incredible, right? But I feel like a lot of teachers, a lot of like school administrators don't realize how accessible educational gaming can be, because they think about video games and
yes.
the cost of like a computer, the cost of a game console, the cost of a screen,
Hmm.
or the negative connotations associated with games. And they don't realize that all it takes is potentially a deck of cards or a
Yeah.
book or a zine or literally a one-page set of instructions on a
Oh
called
yeah.
like Lasers and Feelings, right? And I
Hmm.
think the more people who realize this, I think we are going to see a future where students feel like they have more control over their learning and are more invested in their
Yes.
learning.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the classroom should be a playful space. And I say playful, I mean like full of play, because that is in so many ways how we learn.
Of
And like
course.
is especially true with the really little kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, like you're I'm still blown away that you taught kindergarten remotely during the pandemic,
oh, it
because
was
I
great.
don't know how I'd do that. A lot of
Uh,
songs.
um, it wasn't as much songs as I treated it like a variety show.
Okay, that's
So
cool.
like I had like some stuffed animals that would make appearances on screen,
Oh my
and
god.
but one thing I did is like I did a ton of storytelling,
Yeah.
and and so I would send them on adventures. They're going down a river, and they want to go like this way or that way, but they got to collect stuff. I had there are treasure boxes at the bottom of the ocean. This one has three treasure boxes, but two sharks. That one has one treasure box, but one shark. Which one should you go for? And then they're starting like this was kindergarten, so they're starting to actually like compare small numbers, which is a skill that has to be learned.
Yeah.
But there's no inherent right answer. So I had kids who were like, I want more treasure, so I'm going to the one with more treasure. And I had kids who were like, but this one has only one shark
Danger,
compared to
risk, reward.
yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. I If only I could go back in time and be a student now, things would be different. But I can't. But what I can do is, try to facilitate and host conversations about this, because I think there need to be more teachers like you. There need to be people who are willing to take risks for their students, people who are willing to truly care for their students by giving them control over how they learn and by enabling them to do that with like the right tools or the variety of
Yeah.
tools. And I will say this, Asians represent. The only reason why we're able to do this is because of our amazing patrons, and so we have a lot of people to thank. We're gonna have to figure out a new way to do this because there are so many names on here. Um, but we have a lot of folks who make sure that we can continue to do content like this, to make sure that I don't burn out. We have a whole team of folks at Asians Represent now who are working on like cool topics. We have an entire series of educational videos that we're just going to do on YouTube, that
Oh,
Emma's going to
nice.
take care of, because we're tired of basically being like having folks be like, "Oh, I don't want to listen to a 2-hour podcast on Orientalism. Tell me what it is." You'd be like, "Now here's a YouTube video. Here's 10 minutes."
Oh, that'd
That's a
be good.
big thing we're gonna do.
I
We're
mean,
also.
especially
Oh, go ahead.
I point people to the Asians Represent podcast. Like if you want to learn more, especially right now, it's Asian Heritage Month.
Yeah,
So it's like go check this out if you want to like a deeper dive into some of these themes and how they intersect with like pop culture and games and stuff. Like, go give it a listen.
yeah, yeah. And one of the things that we're doing is we are actually fundraising for AIPI Heritage Month.
Oh, nice.
We've got a campaign going on that we're doing with our good pal John Ryamasa. And essentially what we're doing is we are raising money. The goal is $1,000 over the course of the month. And I'm going to link everything related to this in our show notes. We're going to be collecting donations. I'm going to put out a big social media blast on this starting next week. But we do have a Tiltify campaign that's going to culminate in an actual play at the end of the month that I am extremely, extremely excited about. We have a show at the end of the month that's essentially going to be a Western meets Journey to the West. And it's going to be a two-parter.
I'm sold.
Yeah, it's going to be a two-parter called Hither and Yon in Heaven. It is a Journey to the West inspired fantasy Western two-shot charity game that we're going to host. We're going to include all the dates and everything. But very excited to be doing this. Very excited to be, helping John raise money for this. So if you folks are watching live, I've put the link in the chat. Donate if you can. If you can't, that's totally okay, but spread the word. I will put this in the show notes for folks who are listening on audio, as well as the notes under the video on YouTube. But we will be talking about this a lot on social media. But that said, back to like our patrons, the folks who really make this possible for us. Most honorable Meadowweave Games, most honorable Valorous Games, Dungeon Glitch / Matt, who I actually got to attend D&D Summit with, for better or for worse, D&D Summit with remotely. The most honorable ×2 Epic Impulse, Michelle, Stefan, and Bob C. You folks are incredible, and your support means a lot. And everyone else, on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see all of our patrons there. You folks make this possible. And of course, this conversation wouldn't be possible without you, Ryan, and, the incredible contributions you're making to the games industry. I said this to you at Breakout Con. I said this to you when we first started talking. Like, I am super excited to see where you go with like game design.
I really appreciate that.
Like, you are very good at what you do. And I hope you never stop. I hope you never stop. But that said, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Agents Represent. I will have links to your itch store, your socials on all of our show notes. Folks should reach out to you if they have questions.
Yes.
Buy
yes,
your
please.
games. If you're a teacher, if you took one thing out of this, it's buy Told by Starlight and try that in your classroom, because having played it myself, it is awesome. It is awesome. So that is going to be my recommendation for the entire episode. Not because it's your game, Ryan, because it's just a great game. It's a great game.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And,
you go ahead. Sorry, this is so Canadian of us. This is so Canadian of us.
But no, I've had a great time. I'm really this is a really fun conversation, and like the chance to come on and chat with you, and like for you to make space for like me as well, like on your podcast, on like through your network. I really appreciate that as well. This has been a lot of fun.
No, I appreciate you, and the pleasure is mine, because like the best thing about Agents Represent is that I just get to learn from every guest, and I'm just jazzed to learn. So I'm just happy to be here. But that said, like, you are always welcome on the show. If there is a topic that you think would benefit the community, let me know. There's always a spot for you.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, that said, Thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. Please, I mean it, message Ryan if you have questions. Buy Ryan's games. And all of the games you talked about are, in my opinion, extremely meaningful. Something that would be of benefit to you as like a learner, but also if you're a teacher, your classroom. But that said, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.